Welcome everybody, and for those who are just popping in here, I'm sure we'll see some people kind of straggling in, but for those of you that are here right now, we want to say welcome to our first cohort meeting for our hybrid CERT training. We are super excited to be presenting the curriculum to you guys, especially during this time of pandemic. We haven't been able to do any of our normal activities, and so it's great for us to be able to transition the CERT curriculum to an online kind of hybrid format. So we do have a skills day component of this, and we'll be getting more into all of the specificities of it here in a minute. But the TBD basically means that because of the pandemic, obviously, we don't have the skills day scheduled. We are hoping for early next year to do that. So while we're waiting, we will have these online classes and cohort meetings for you guys. And then we will also have a wonderful chat room, which we'll also talk about. So we'll go, thank you. All right, so to introduce everybody here, the person who's speaking is me, Selena Brown. I work for Woodside Fire Protection District as the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. I also have here on board Mark Dolan, who's the WPV-CERT Chair. Oh, we got to ask him to unmute. Hold on, let's find him. Oh, no. Okay, you're good.
I'm here. Thank you, Selena. I'm Mark Dolan. I'm the chair of the WPV-CERT committee. And on behalf of all of us, I'd really like to thank all of our instructors and the firefighter paramedics who will be part of this training. Really excited to get it started back up again. And really appreciate all the work of Cam McCowan, who's been the spearhead of getting this program together and getting all the work done. So really appreciate that, Cam. And the other folks here on the slide, you're going to get to see throughout this this course: Chip Swan, Dave Ellison, Dr. Vicky Coe, and of course our firefighter and paramedics. So very excited that this is all coming together, and I'll pass it back to you, Cam.
Fantastic. So some of you have been, take two. Some of you have taken the in-person class before, either within Woodside Portola Valley or in another jurisdiction. And just to put this a little bit in context, that this is a national curriculum that has been around for a number of years. And in the past, we would get together and we'd have classroom meetings on a series of days. And that would include all of the lectures and all of the skills training. And what we're doing now, when we talk about it being a hybrid course, is hybrid because it's a combination of being both online curriculum and in person. And there are some really wonderful things about this we're very excited about, but it's also very new. And so you are our first launch of it, implementing this locally. And so throughout the process, I really encourage you to ask questions, to make observations, and be a part of developing this program so that we can have the strength of it being the national curriculum and also the power of it being localized, and so that we're making it meaningful for how things are right here in the Woodside Portola Valley area. In order to help take this national curriculum and really make it meaningful, there are a few things that we've set up. One of them is what we're doing right now, and that's a weekly discussion meeting. And it's really going to be up to us as a group to decide how we use this. Is it going to be primarily the questions that come up when you go through the curriculum? It's also going to be some elements of tech support in terms of how do I do the curriculum and making sure that works for you. And so we also have a online discussion group so that not only can people meet on the weekly in person, because this is about developing a team. The big disadvantage of doing it online is that we don't get a chance to meet. We don't get a chance to find out who we are. And so we're hoping that will happen a little bit in both in these meetings and also in the discussion group. Just a quick question. If I could get, using the chat room for Zoom, how many people, give me a sense of how have people had a chance to log on to and get registered with the online curriculum and kind of manage that? Basically, if there's enough of a need, I'll kind of go through some of the steps for the logistics side of the house. So right now, if you can take a moment, just write in there, just kind of give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of so-so. And something I actually, as people are filling that out, it's a really important detail. Even though we kind of said, okay, we're going to do weekly classes, and this week we'll focus on Unit 1, and next week we'll do Unit 2, it's not strict. If you didn't get a chance to do it yet, that's totally okay. And in fact, we're asking folks, it's like, if you have friends who want to be involved, great. Up to like until we're actually doing the in-person skills testing, someone can catch up and someone can do all the classes. This is about us developing the strongest community emergency response team, supporting everybody. And so, okay, I'm getting, it looks like some people have registered, some people have taken some unit, some people are, there's been some frustrations with the logistics of the class. I'm going to do a really quick, just kind of overview. This is not the only time to ask questions. The discussion list that we have set up, feel free to email that about questions in terms of how did you do this, how do you do that, because we want this to work for everyone. So key components, important detail. The discussion list, these online meetings, they are optional. They are not required to get the certificate that says I have passed the CERT class. We strongly, strongly encourage it because this is how we're going to get the face-to-face and meet each other, but it's not required. Okay, so let's see, let me take a quick look at the chats. Okay, I'm going to do just a very quick kind of walkthrough. Right, you see that in the emails you've received, in the registration, you've gotten a link to the registration, and that takes you to the University of Utah School of Medicine. That is who has helped to create the online version of this pre-existing national curriculum. They've done a tremendous amount of work on it. And so we're using their website. You can register on it. Actually, I apologize, my red circle's in the wrong place, but down here for registering on it. After you have registered, then at that point you can log on. And when you log in to go back to so that you can do, you're not doing all 8 units all at one time, it'll come up with a dashboard. And in fact, it'll say, and then you'll select My Courses. When it lists your courses, you can then click on Community Emergency Response Team to go back to that class. And then you get a list of the modules. You can see that actually for this version of it, that I have gone ahead and I have now gone through the first unit, sections 1 and 2. I have also done unit 2, but I'm in the middle of doing sections 3 and 4. And so you can work on it and then come back to it. To do so, you click on the red arrow, and then that'll take you to the next unit. And then at that point, you can launch the unit. One of the other small differences between the in-person version and the online version is that in person, you'd be handed a big printed binder that is the participant manual. For better and for worse, you now get an online version. It is a PDF, you can print it. But one detail that I think is really nice is that as you go through the online unit, up in this upper right-hand corner, there's a little book that'll actually take you to the chapter that you're in. And so like, let's say that when you're doing one of the knowledge checks, it'll take you to the part of the manual. And something that I'm sure you'll discover is that this is a huge amount of content. Really, we need to think of it as this is something that this book and this course is something that we're going to be coming back to time and time again. And it's something for us to be working towards. It's not about, I'm going to learn all of this, close the book, and I'm done. And I will tell you the truth. One of the reasons why I became a volunteer instructor is that that's an opportunity to reinforce knowledge that I don't always get a chance to use. So let me just plant the seed. If any of you have an instructor in you, we're always looking for people to help. And it is a tremendous way of reinforcing that knowledge. We're really excited that a lot of people who have taken the CERT class before are taking this again. We strongly encourage that and we welcome you. So the other component, and this is what makes it hybrid, is we're going to do the online curriculum. We've got the online material, but a lot of these are physical skills. There are things that we want in order to be able to make a good sling. There's a hands-on component. And so the way this is set up is that we're going to do all of the lecture component first. And then at the end of it, we'll get together and we will do some online, some in-person. It's both the training, the hands-on, the reinforcement of it. And also so that we have a baseline of skills, it's also a testing component. I don't want to scare anyone off with the word testing though. It's very much about so that we are comfortable and confident in our knowledge. It's not about a go, no go. When you take the class online, you'll see what those standardized skills are. I also want to reassure you that there's been a great deal of discussion and reinforcement about how we're going to do that when it comes time for us to do this hands-on training, how we can do so in a way that is safe. Who knows what the next few months will bring us, but even if we are still in the depth of the pandemic, that there are ways of doing this in very careful, mindful ways. Because unfortunately, the disasters that we experience are not, I neglected to turn off my phone. The potential disasters we have aren't necessarily going to wait for the perfect time. So we need to go forward anyhow. So before I hand this back to Selena, are there any questions about the logistics of the course, about the logistics of the local implementation of it? Or and go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself or to write it as a question in the chat menu.
Hi, Cam, this is Marty Rayner. I just started this, so it's all kind of new to me. And one thing I noticed today, because I was trying to carve out some time to work on it and get the Unit 1 done before this evening, is there's no, it doesn't tell you how much time to plan for any of the modules.
That's a really good point. I don't know, and actually, I don't know off the top of my head if that information is hiding anywhere. I do know that you can look at the participant manual and you can look at basically how many sections there are. That won't immediately tell you, but I do know that let's see, if I remember correctly, and David, if you could help me with this, I believe they said that you should expect all 8 units to take about 12 hours total. David, do you remember
right.
that? Yeah,
that's right. And I went through it,
Okay.
3 months ago at this point, I think. I went through it slightly less time, but the way the course is structured, you basically have to follow along with the oral presentation that's being made. And for your information, you'll see that the oral presentation is very close to the participant's manual, amplified and supplemented by visual, in some cases, films and so forth. I think you ought to plan an hour to an hour and a quarter for each segment of, and there are what, 13 or so total. It's in that range of time.
something like that.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions about the logistics before we go on?
And Marty, hello, ex-neighbor. One other thing is that you can go backward and look at things. You can't advance farther forward than what you've already listened to.
Yes, I noticed that because I tried.
Yeah, so you can't go to the end and find out, this is so, I want to read the end of the book. So they keep track of that and they keep you from being able to move forward. But you can always move back and backtrack.
Yeah, the content is actually quite good.
Yeah, well, it's all useful.
I've been very impressed with it.
Yeah.
And I want to, and as I said, I want to reassure to folks that this is the big broad stroke and not to be overwhelmed by it. And let me just come back to thank you again for everyone for taking the time. It's really wonderful. There was a question.
If you don't mind, are these sessions going to be put online?
Oh, this meeting tonight?
Yes.
Yes, we are recording them and we will make them available. Basically, when you will at the very end, we'll send out a follow-up email. If you're not already registered on our WPV-CERT website, we'll send out a link showing you how to log on to that, and that these videos will be available on that website.
Oh, thanks.
Absolutely. Looking at the chat menu, there was also a question about how this relates to WPV-Ready, and Mark will definitely talk about that later. And we've got a tremendous opportunity here in terms of the many levels of how we are prepared as individuals and as a community. Okay. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Selena, who's just going to talk about kind of, okay, looking at disaster preparedness, what does that look like locally?
Yeah, so I just want to give you guys a just welcome. And again, like Cam said, don't feel overwhelmed. With the CERT training, there are so many different roles that you can play, and everybody will find their own niche. And what you do in your day-to-day life may cross over or may not cross over when you're responding to a disaster. So maybe, you're going to be learning tons of skills and tons of different roles, but don't feel like you will have to respond in any of the roles, especially if you feel uncomfortable. We basically throw it all out there so you can absorb it and figure out what's going to stick for you. One of the major unfortunate things about us not being able to be in a classroom together is we go around the room and I ask everybody to talk about, what they do or what they do as a job or some of their special hobbies. And then they talk about why they're taking the class. And that's a great time for us to get to know each other. And there's usually a lot of really interesting, everybody has something interesting behind them that you have no idea that they have as part of their skill set. So as you're going through all this stuff, just keep in mind, if maybe you write terribly, you have a terrible handwriting, or you're terrified of blood, there is still a role for you in CERT. Now,
and actually, I'm going to put it out there that may be one of the pieces of conversation that we may use the discussion group for. One of the great things about this online course is we actually have a lot more people in the class than we would normally be able to have in person. So we're going to go ahead and have that kind of question of the why are you taking it, what do you hope to get out of it introduction as part of that conversation online.
I love that. So that absolutely, because it's still very, very important. And when we eventually get to see each other and work together, we'll have backgrounds to the faces that we finally get to see. Just to give you guys a little bit of an idea of Woodside Fire Protection District. So the reason why CERT is so important is because you guys live in a very, it's a very unique area in terms of San Mateo County, especially. For the fire district, we cover 32 square miles, and we only have 3 fire stations. And within those 3 fire stations, we have about 15 personnel that are on shift total. So you only have about 15 people that could potentially respond to 20 to 25,000 residents. So if a major disaster happened, if an earthquake happened, and if the fire and there was a call for a first alarm fire, immediately it would require 5 fire engines. We don't even have 5 fire engines in our community. We have mutual aid where we would have Redwood City come over and help us. And so right off the bat, there goes all your fire engines. So it's really important that you as individuals are prepared to lessen the impact of disasters by taking these courses and knowing what to do when there are things that happen, say if there's a gas leak or somebody stuck inside of a house, or just doing a damage assessment of your community. We look to you, the first responders look to the residents as part of the response mechanism. And Woodside here too, you know, we're very, we don't really have a lot of commercial businesses. We don't have, you know, multiple story buildings. We are mostly, you know, rural. We're a horse community. We are a wildland area, and it's just residential. So we have some very unique areas within it. You know, and even within Woodside, there are some areas that, you know, the wildland is very thick, and then some areas where it's very open. Yeah, Carol, do you have a question?
Oh, I just wanted to say, we do have a few businesses up here in the Skylonda area, just so you know. It isn't only residents.
Oh, no, I didn't say that. I just meant that we are not, the majority of the buildings are residential. We do have commercial businesses. We have them down in Ladera. We have them in Woodside. We have them in Portola Valley. They're scattered about, but it's nowhere near what Redwood City has or Menlo Park has or our surrounding jurisdictions. So overall, we're mostly residential. And that's a little bit, that's one of the unique aspects of our community. Hold on, just moving forward. Okay, so I want to talk about two, since a lot of you guys, some of you have already taken the unit and some of you have not, just to be aware of what some of the local hazards are for us. Our major disasters that we prepare for are going to be obviously wildland fire, right? Earthquakes, flooding, landslides, and now we have pandemic, which adds another component to it. So those are the major hazards that we address throughout the CERT curriculum. Let me see, is there any questions pertaining to that in particular? This is good. Let's see, let's check the chat room out. Great.
And actually, just a logistics thing that we might want to consider is that as you take the class and as you take the units, as questions come up, jot them down and either send them straight out to the discussion list. All of the instructors are on that list as well, or write them down and hold on to them until the next Monday meeting. Because this really is about the time to explore some of the questions that have come up or talk about how to make it really local.
Yeah, and I do want to mention too that we are also unique where most of our jurisdiction in Woodside Fire District, and when I say Woodside Fire Protection District, I mean Portola Valley, Woodside, and then unincorporated areas, which is of San Mateo County, which is like Skyline, Emerald Hills, Los Trancos, Vista Verde, Ladera. So there, and if I've forgotten one, I'm sorry, but there are several areas that we cover that's just not Woodside, Portola Valley. And a lot of the residents, we live on the west side of 280. And if there was a major earthquake, which we're all waiting for basically, 280 could potentially go down. And that's going to cut us off from the rest of the county. And the reality is when Red Cross sends help to certain areas, or when we have mutual aid, the people with the lowest population density are going to be the ones that are not going to get the help as quickly as some of the higher population density areas. So you might read in the curriculum to be prepared for 3 days. We always say in these classes that a minimum of 1 to 2 weeks is what we want you to be prepared for because of the way, you know, the land is here and how easily we can be cut off, even though we are so close to the rest of San Mateo County. I'm just looking up on here. Okay. Well, I'm going to pass this over if there are no other questions. Oh, I do want to actually, one last thing I want to address is notifications and being aware. Hopefully, I'm going to be a broken record for all the people in here, but maybe some of you have not heard about SMC Alert. So San Mateo County Alert, it is our way of pushing out emergency notifications. So if you go to smcalert.info, you can sign up on their website, and then you can choose to receive text messages or emails or phone calls. And that is Woodside Fire District's primary way of pushing out emergency notifications. Yes, we have a lot more stuff that we have to deal with now, you know, in terms of the PSPS, so the public safety power shutoffs. So you may not, you may not have power, or you may have power for a short period of time. But that is our primary way of getting information out. As well, there is 1680, which is the Portola Valley AM radio station, which is a really good thing to just be aware of. It reaches further than just Portola Valley. And as well, being just on alert if you want to get information as to current situations or current calls in the community. There's firedispatch.com, and then there's also an app called Pulse Point. Well, I'll make sure to put this in the chat box. And this is probably some good stuff that would happen afterwards in our chat room about different ways that people keep updated on current situation in their area. Okay.
At this point, we're going to actually have Mark then talk a little bit about what does this WPV-CERT look like, and how does this national curriculum get implemented locally?
Great, thank you, Cam and Selena. Yeah, so one of the things you'll quickly realize when you start taking this class is that it is a national training standard. So what is very important for us to do in these class sessions is to talk about how this applies to us in our local fire district. And when CERT programs get established, they have to be sponsored by an official agency. So nobody can just start a CERT program. You have to be sponsored by an actual government agency. Typically it's the fire department, fire district. So as you go through this first unit, if you've taken it already or you haven't started it yet, when you go through, it's going to start bringing up some questions about, how does this work locally to you? And so what I'm going to talk about in the next several slides is how this program applies to us here in the fire district. Lots of different districts do it differently. Different places have different hazards. They have different levels of participation. We've implemented the program here to be the best fit for us as we have been able to develop it so far. And so just know that as you go through the material, the sponsoring agency for WPV-CERT is the Woodside Fire Protection District. And community emergency response team members assist emergency response personnel when requested in accordance with standard operating procedures developed by the sponsoring agency. So we do have an SOP. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but that's kind of the framework. Next slide, please. So what is the disaster response role of the community emergency response team? Well, the primary role is immediately after a disaster when response resources are overwhelmed or delayed, as Selena just talked about. We've got 3 fire engines and 15 people on duty. If there's a major incident, major earthquake or other incident, then they're going to be overwhelmed and they're going to need assistance. So that's the bridge that CERT team members can play in this model. It can also be used at request of the fire district or the towns or any agency that wants to request our assistance for emergency disaster response activities, or just basic things if they need volunteer assistance. So we can help with special event coordination. We can help with manning phones in a call center. In fact, just recently with the COVID response, there was a major social bridging project that CERT members participated in where they made tens of thousands of phone calls to potentially at-risk individuals to check on them and make sure that they were safe. And so many other non-disaster emergency roles. The benefit to the team is that we are a volunteer resource that's well organized, we're equipped, and we can assist when requested by these agencies. Next slide. So as I previously mentioned, and you'll see in the participant manual in the training unit, they mention the SOP, Standard Operating Procedures. This is our kind of rules of the road, how our program works, what are our procedures, and how are we activated, who can activate us. It talks about the training levels and requirements of members of our team. And it outlines how we respond. What is our organizational structure as a group? So how do we come together for maximum effectiveness as a volunteer organization? How do we organize that group? Which we'll go into a lot more in detail in the next unit. It also provides some details of position descriptions of our command post staff, what roles they're supposed to be playing. You can check out the SOP. It's on our website. Just go to WPV-CERT.org and look for the standard operating procedures. You will definitely, by the end of this course, you will want to have read it so you understand the specifics of how our program is implemented here in the district. So one of the other things that they specifically mention in this unit is protection for disaster workers. So if you're volunteering in the program, you might have a question about, well, what happens if I get injured, or what happens if I accidentally injure somebody and maybe I have some legal, maybe I get sued. What are the protections out there? How am I protected, and how am I participating as a volunteer in the organization? So in the book, the first thing it talks about is our Good Samaritan laws. And these protect volunteers who provide prudent and reasonable care. So for example, if you come up on a victim and you provide medical assistance to them, and that medical assistance, you use your training and you do your best to provide care to them, and maybe then you end up getting sued for some reason, as long as you are acting in a prudent and reasonable manner and in accordance with your training and skills, then you may be protected under the Good Samaritan law. In addition, next slide. Here in California, we have something called the Disaster Service Worker Volunteer Program. This is an additional level of protection to you as a volunteer. In this case, it provides workers' compensation benefits to disaster service workers who get injured while participating in authorized disaster activities. And that also includes training, as long as it's appropriately pre-approved. It also provides limited immunity from liability. So in that previous example, if you are working within the skills and training that you've received here in our program and you're following in line with the standard operating procedures, if you were sued for providing that care, then you may receive limited immunity from liability in this case. The Disaster Service Worker Volunteer Program is a benefit that we are now able to provide thanks to the towns appointing the fire district as its authorized designee of the program. But there are some additional basic training requirements. They're pretty simple to meet, but after you've completed this course, you're going to need to make sure to continue to attend at least one training class, drill, or exercise per year. You need to have a current CPR and AED training, which is now available online. So it doesn't have to be the in-person, but there is currently the online version of that. We're also hoping to be able to do this in person on the skills day, so you might not necessarily have to take that separately. And then additionally, you'll notice when you read through the curriculum that it does recommend, and we are requiring for this level of coverage, that you take the IS 100 and IS 700 online class. These are FEMA. IS stands for Independent Study. That just means it's an online class. And those take a couple hours to complete. And then once you've done that, you've done that. Next slide.
Actually, Mark, we have one quick question that's relevant to the Disaster Service Worker Program, and that was that, is that something that is universal, or is it specifically for people who are members of the CERT team?
Yeah, so once you're a disaster service, when you're a registered disaster service worker, that coverage applies throughout the state. So, but you still need to be working under an SOP. So this is a great question. Maybe we can dive into the details of that separately, but essentially once an agency has given you disaster service worker credentials under a specific category, so there are different categories. So CERT is a category. So if you get DSW qualification through our program as a CERT, and then you go get deployed, let's say to San Francisco, and you get injured in San Francisco, then you would be covered in that case, as long as you're following the rules and SOP of the jurisdiction you're working under. But that's a good question. We can dive into some of the details on that.
And actually, I think that a part of the interpretation, if I interpret the question correctly, there's also the just taking this class alone does not make you a disaster service worker, but that's where being a member of the CERT team, and that's where doing the basic training, what you see on this slide, attending the regular class at least once a year, and taking the NIMS class, which is the National Incident Management System. Because a lot of what CERT is it's taking this training and then it's working as a team. And so there are those baselines before you get sworn in as a disaster service worker.
Absolutely. All right, so when you take this first unit, you're going to notice that there's going to be an organizational chart. And we're going to dive into this much more in the next unit. This is just kind of a high-level overview of how we as a team organize. And as Cam and Selena have been mentioning, a very important part of the CERT program is that we are a team, and we need to be able to organize ourselves so that we can be as effective as possible as a group of people. And to do that, as we all know, we have to have some kind of organization. If we all just show up and nobody knows what to do, nobody knows what the organizational structure is, then we're not going to be very effective. So a big part of CERT training is understanding something called the Incident Command System, or ICS. We'll go into that in the next unit. But just a high-level view, so if you're wondering how this would play out, if you are a CERT member and let's say that there was a major earthquake, we have what we've defined as 3 branches. And those branches are Woodside, Portola Valley, and the Skyline area. And in a major incident, you would stage or go to the staging location of one of these branches. And then once you do that, the team starts to organize and form into this structure. And again, I'm not going to go into the details on this now, but we will in the next unit. But that includes having an incident commander, operations chief, planning chief, medical, search and rescue, fire teams, and other associated people involved in this organization. So a big part of the CERT program, as Selena mentioned, is that this is a volunteer program. Just because you're a CERT member doesn't mean that you're obligated to participate in any way. You might have no interest in the sight of blood, but you might be a great handwriter and a perfect scribe, or a radio operator or amateur radio operator, or you might have other skills or training which would slot you into a great role. The key here is that CERT is a voluntary program, and we want to make sure that if you participate in this, there's no obligation. If you do receive a notification that our CERT team is activated, then of course you're always going to check on yourself, your family, and your home first. You're going to check on your neighbors and neighborhood. And if you do have an existing neighborhood emergency plan, such as a WPV-Ready division, you need to understand what their plans are so that you can integrate with that. And then in a major earthquake scenario, then you would proceed to your nearest branch staging location, only if you're willing and able to assist. Again, no obligation. First and foremost, we always take care of our family, and only when we're willing and able, then we participate in the CERT program. Next slide. So as Cam mentioned, this training is, there's a lot of stuff to learn. And a lot of these are what we call perishable skills and require refresher training. So a lot of things that you learn in this class, you will need to continue to refresh that skill. We will have additional training on our calendar. These are just the current classes we have scheduled. So I would highly encourage you to sign up for our December 12th radio communications class. And then on January 16th, we have a command post operations class, which dives much more into the whole incident command system that we were just talking about. All of our events are up on the WPV-CERT.org/events page, so be sure to always look at that for the most recent opportunities.
And actually, Mark, one thing I want to add is that when we do provide a class, for example, Dr. Ko just did a class on Saturday about how to organize your first aid kit, that we do record those and then make those available. So not only are there the upcoming classes, but we're creating a library of videos of previous classes as well.
That's right. We're building a great repository of training videos, which will be wonderful. You'll be able to go back and look at any of them in the future. And then we have a whole bunch of additional topics that we hope to put up. Vicki, did you have a comment? Unmute.
I did. Actually, I had a question that just occurred to me. If people cannot attend the refresher courses in the day that they're given, is there a way for them to then get credit for taking the refresher course by viewing it online at a later date?
That's a great question.
We'll have to think about that. We'll put that on our to-do list.
I'll write it down right now.
Thank you. So again, being part of the CERT team doesn't just mean that we're responding only to earthquakes or those type of emergencies. A big benefit to the CERT team is that it allows people that are interested in these additional skill sets to take classes such as shelter management, amateur radio, traffic and crowd control, other things that you may be interested in learning about. And then if there is a need for that, then we can apply those skills that you have here in our community. So it's an avenue for us to be able to have a trained and well-organized group of volunteers that have some capabilities to offer to our community. So
in fact, this coming weekend, there's going to be a class not given by our jurisdiction, but I believe it's, is it Belmont? That is going to be teaching a class on basically sandbagging 101.
Yeah,
We'll be sending out an email.
Rapid City. It's a joint sandbagging class. Yes, I should get that link and send it out to them. Oh, and I also want to mention too that for those of you that are watching and hearing all these people talk, I am the only one that's getting paid to be on this on this class tonight. Everybody else is a volunteer, and this program really, the only way it thrives is by having residents come together and volunteer their time out of the idea of supporting their community and knowing how important it is to have that sense of community. So thank you again, because none of this would happen if it wasn't for all these volunteers. All these, most of these people on here that I know haven't taught before, so I roped them into becoming instructors. And Cam, I loved how you pushed that right off the bat, so I really appreciate that. But if there's anything in here that you think you can contribute to our program, we are more than happy and would love to have you participate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's also worth mentioning that the CERT program is a national program, but even here in California, our Governor Gavin Newsom through, I believe it was $50 million towards developing the CERT and similar programs here within California. So it's been well recognized that the CERT program is a valuable community tool, and that there are active resources being put to develop these programs.
So that is the extent that we have as an organized, prepared, and really the rest of the time is for what questions you have, comments, ways of making this better, ways of making it more approachable, and down to the nitty-gritty. So really at this point, we want to say thank you. This is about strengthening our individual skills. This is about strengthening our immediate neighborhoods, and then strengthening the response teams as well. And so at this point, the floor is open, both through the chat group, and also feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions.
Cam, it's Vic Shaxter. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So I have one question. When we went through, for those of us that are doing this to review what we learned some year or years ago, I have something called the CERT Emergency Response Team Field Operating Guide. And there's a lot of great information in there. And my question is, can anybody inform us if this guide is basically still useful and valid, and whether or not it's going to be addressed as part of the program? Anything to kind of update those of us that have this, because it's a good it's a good learning resource, a refreshment resource. And I'm curious if it's still valuable.
Yeah, so I can address that. We actually just got a shipment of the FOGs, the Field Operating Guide, a big batch of them. And so we need to get these FOGs in the hands of everybody that's taking the class. We'll have to work on the logistics of how we can do that. But yes, the FOG is a generic FOG. It doesn't have anything specific to our program, but it's certainly a useful thing that everybody should have in their CERT backpack. And as the course goes on, we'll talk more about that, because as we get into the search and rescue and the markings and things, we always use the FOG as a reference for that. So it's still 100% a valuable tool. And there is a new version of it that we just got boxes and boxes of. So we'll need to work on the logistics of getting those handed out.
Okay, thank you.
Carol, it looks like you've got a question.
Yes, very interestingly, I was cleaning out the container up in Skywood by the Skywood Trading Post. And I hadn't gone through, but they have a bunch of old booklets put out by CERT, including, I don't know if you can see this. It's a 2002 CERT Field Operations Guide. So I think they were extras, and I'd be glad to lend them to Mark or whoever if you want to see if there's good information that should be salvaged and passed on.
Yeah, that's the SERP FOG. And so, yeah, I have a couple copies of that. And so we will be integrating some of that material. But the FOG that Vic is talking about is the yellow one that was handed out in the CERT class. And that is a different FOG. That's our official FOG for the CERT program.
Right. Yeah, well, you had mentioned there wasn't one specific to CERT, but there is this old one. So you might want to see what you can do with that. Maybe put it online.
On the chat menu, we do have the question of, do we have enough volunteers? And I would say there is no such thing as enough volunteers. Really, this is something that we can, and I would encourage us to grow it as large as possible because of the uniqueness of our environment, that so long as we are able to maintain quality, that we really, if you have friends and family, please encourage them to take the class. As I said, you can start anytime up to when we're doing the skills testing, and then we're going to be doing it again. So yeah, definitely. And that volunteering can exist in many levels. Another question that was listed was, send it with a first aid kit ordered. And that's something that there is a tremendous resource that, as I said, Dr. Ko did a wonderful class about how to organize it. On our WPV-Ready website, we do have order forms for ordering a really high quality, trauma-oriented first aid kit. And I want to put out that one of the reasons why it's part of WPV-Ready is that we really want this to be that, I mean, in a fantasy world, every single household would have. And so and we will be taking a look at that. And one of the things, if you look at what Dr. Ko covered, was a little bit also of how can we then take it to the next level of what we might need as a CERT team responding, because we really want to make this as scalable and as sustainable a system as possible.
You know, there was a question that was asked earlier, and I'm going to let Chip ask or answer this. But I believe it was Bill that was asking about what WPV-Ready is. So Chip, if you want to just give a little brief overview, since we've been throwing around the two terms, and maybe you can bring some clarification.
Can you hear me now?
Nope. Yes, with a reverb.
Please stand by. We're experiencing technical difficulties.
How's this?
Excellent.
Yes.
Good, you can hear me now. Great. So we have two aspects of emergency. One is being prepared for them and one is responding to them. And CERT is based on the FEMA-based national and now worldwide program, the curriculum for community emergency response teams. And that's what our focus is on here today. WPV-Ready is about preparedness, and it's about hopefully getting every resident of our fire district as prepared as possible so that when disaster strikes, they've got a first aid kit, and they have water, and they have food, and they have a plan, and they have fire extinguishers and smoke alarms, and just all the basic things that keep them from becoming a victim. So they don't need CERT responders when that bad day comes. Does that make sense? Shall I say more, because I can go on?
I think that was good. Thank you.
Really,
Selena and Chip, this is Dave. May I ask that you also talk about the divisions that have been organized within CERT for many years, some of which are very active in their communities, and how that fits into WPV-Ready, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the past, in fact, for the last 20 years and more, the ask was for, well, let me first start and say that our fire district is divided up geographically into 25 divisions, and that is an incident command term for a geographical area. And it was defined, the divisions were defined mostly along natural bounds. Some of them ended up being a little weird, like a division on one side of the street is one division, the other side is another division, and those ended up being a little hard to manage. But for the most case, you have some very naturally defined divisions. My own here in Woodside Hills, you know, we've got two ways in and out, and it's almost entirely one homeowners association, so it's a very natural division definition. Now, those divisions in the past, we recruited very hard to get leaders, division leaders, and we call them DLs. You'll see that term a lot. And those DLs were asked to not only look after the preparedness of their local residents and to recruit neighborhood leaders or block captains, there's various terms around, but also to organize for response and to use the CERTs. See, our CERT program has only recently become a centrally coordinated team that has kind of a critical mass capability to put out a strong response on the street. So before, we were a catch and release program. The fire department would train CERTs, and we'd ask them to go back to their division and get involved with other CERTs and organize with the division leader and put together a local response. And so it was a huge ask for the division leaders, but in a lot of cases, in about half of the divisions, there was somebody willing to step up and take on this monstrous task. And Dave here is one of them. We've got several others here. Vicky in her area, and Mark did a good job. People in my area did, but it kind of fell apart then. So we're in various states of readiness right now. And we have about half of the district has no leadership, no strong leadership at the division level, but we've got neighborhoods here and there. And so what we're trying to do now is to focus on penetrating individuals and neighborhoods so that we can build up from there. And if something turns up that looks like a division, like someone's taking on the whole division, great, then that'll be another division because we've got those defined. Otherwise, if someone just can take on half the division, we'll call it an area leader. We'll call it something else. But
and if I could just jump in, because we are coming close to the end of the hour. Yeah. Kind of as a more broad stroke response to that, I think I really want to emphasize that this is a continuum between, so it's very easily that someone might take this course and say that this is something that I want to now use as individual skills, and that's fantastic. Or it may me that this helps inform and develop the division level response and the neighborhood level response, and that's fantastic. And it also may be that something that we are doing something as the whole community emergency response team, and that these are all tiers that we hope to have connected and reinforcing each other. As you heard from Chip, there's a little bit of a history in terms of as we're finding our way to having it as a strong continuum. And so a lot of you who've been involved with the organizations, both WPV-Ready and WPV-CERT, are kind of aware of that transition. But really what we're looking at is having it so that that we have great response, home by home, neighborhood by neighborhood, and as a whole community.
Thank you, Cam. Well summarized there.
Are there any questions before we call it a night?
I have a question that may be really obvious, but I'm just wondering, is there, as far as support material for this class, is there somewhere like individual units, something in addition to the participant manual, or is the manual it?
The manual has all of the units component
Yes.
in terms of written material. I think it's like 238 pages or something.
Yes, I have the manual. I downloaded it.
Yeah. We have had a few questions pop up in terms of the, do we intend to provide a printed version? And to be honest, we haven't really discussed that yet. And so if there's a demand and if we can, and we will definitely take a look at that. I'm seeing that someone
But
has
it's not something that I've missed.
No, not
Okay.
at all.
Thank you.
Are you doing the online course?
Well, I guess I registered for it and I read all about Unit 1 today.
Fantastic.
And you took the quizzes, the online quizzes?
I did not see the quizzes. Where are they?
I think she
Yeah.
doesn't know the link for what she's supposed to, the
I-
online class.
Get the quiz until you've done the unit, right?
She doesn't know about it.
Yeah, that's the issue. I think if I can suggest, the text message or email that goes out to folks will include maybe specific suggestion about how to get the online course in addition to the participants manual, because I think that's the issue that was just being discussed.
And we will definitely share that, reinforce that registration information, both for the folks who are on the call and also to share with others.
Exactly.
Yes, if you can get that to this question. But I do have a question for you if we're done with that subject.
Please.
Did you have a further question? Marianne, did you have a further question?
Just wanted to know if someone could maybe put on the chat where the quizzes are.
The online classes. Yeah.
They're part of the online course itself, and there will be a specific reference for you to follow to go to that online course.
Yeah, she needs it on the chat, I think.
Well,
Sorry. Anyway, I had a question for you all. Because I came across a treasure trove of booklets up in the container. I had been ignoring them. And one of them is for the South County Amateur Radio Emergency Service Handbook, which of course is ham radio. And I'm just wondering if you're going to be integrating a little bit of introduction to ham radio within the CERT classes.
You have just done a beautiful setup for our next training webinar. And so the next training webinar is all about radio communication. I'm going to actually right now, in just a second, I'm going to put a link to the sign up for that class. It's going to be December 12th. Oh, Mark got me. So in the chat window, you'll see a link to that. And forgive me, Carol, I want to be respectful of people's time. And because it is coming up on 7 o'clock, the short version is yes, we use ham radio. The long version is let's talk about that in the next training.
Yes. And one, if I can just stick in one more little question.
Certainly.
A fabulous little pocket guide from 2006 from the National Wildfire Coordinating Group I'd love to share with you sometime.
That is actually a perfect example of the kind of conversation, the kind of material that I would encourage you to add to the discussion list. And so I would encourage you to, if that specific resource, is to go ahead and post that on the mailing list.
Yeah, I'll see if it's online.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yes. By the way, the quizzes are easy. And if you fail the first time like I did, you just take it the second time. Same questions, haha.
So it's all about the learning. So without further ado, I'm going to call it an evening, and I want to thank you all so much for being here. This is about us being community prepared, and this is about us.